The Virgin Mary has been venerated since the early church as the one through whom Jesus crossed the divine human border and as our spiritual mother. Martin Luther described her as our model of humility, servanthood, and obedience. There are many expressions of the Virgin Mary in Latin American countries. Probably no other image is more identified with Hispanic heritage in the United States than that of Mary, Our Lady of Guadalupe. In December of 1531, Juan Diego Cuauhtlac witnessed an apparition of Mary of Tepeyac, a hill near Mexico City. She spoke to Juan Diego Cuauhtlac in his native Nahuatl language and identified herself as the mother of the very true deity. She asked him to tell the archbishop to build a church at that site so she could be with God's people. Knowing that the archbishop would want proof of her appearance, Mary asked Juan Diego to gather roses in his tilma, or cloak, to take to the archbishop. When Juan Diego opened his tilma before the archbishop, the flowers fell to the floor, revealing the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe imprinted on the fabric of his tilma. In the image, her black hair hangs loose in the style of a virgin, unmarried woman. The black band of her dress shows that she is pregnant. She is clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, as described in Revelations 12:1. Her hands are clasped in prayer and her eyes downturned in humility. Upon seeing her image, the archbishop fell to his knees. On December 26, 1531, the archbishop installed the tilma in a hastily constructed chapel. A basilica stands there today with the tilma still on display.
The Virgin of Guadalupe clearly identified with the indigenous people. The mother of the very true deity is dark-skinned and dressed in indigenous clothing. Her pregnancy foreshadows the birth of Jesus, as well as the birth of the church in Latin America and the birth of the mestizo people. Representations of the moment the archbishop fell on his knees before Juan Diego are the only known images of a white European kneeling before an indigenous person. Her appearance to Juan Diego Cuauhtlac gives honor and respect to the conquered people. Our Lady of Guadalupe recalls God's disruptive justice, echoing the Magnificat. God, my Savior, has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. Luke chapter 1, verses 52-53. The Virgin of Guadalupe gave dignity and purpose to the Mexican people in a colonial society built on injustice and violent evangelism. But in an oppressive colonial regime, indigenous power is a threat. Almost immediately after the appearance of Mary at Tepeyac, Spanish clerics renamed her the Virgin of Guadalupe, after their own region of Spain, erasing her indigenous name and place. Over time, artists have painted her skin and hair lighter, and her indigenous features are nearly unrecognizable. She no longer looks like the people she originally identified with. Nevertheless, the Virgin of Guadalupe is still a powerful symbol that the coming of her Son, Jesus, brings justice, equity, and belonging for all people. Her feast day, December 12th, is a treasured celebration in remembrance of the incarnation of Jesus Christ. In solemnity and devotion, it most compares to a little winter Easter for many of our Hispanic heritage churches. That solemnity and devotion was violated in an ELCA mission church on December 12, 2021.
On that day, Bishop Megan Rohr of the ELCA Sierra Pacific Synod disrupted the celebration of the Feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe at Mission Esperanza. Against the advice of Latin staff, Bishop Rohr terminated the Reverend Nelson Rabel Gonzalez as pastor immediately prior to festival worship. For some of these actions on this particular day resembled actions taken by colonizers when they would storm indigenous villages in the middle of their sacred festivals, said the Reverend Hazel Salazar Davidson. Pastor Robel Gonzalez was subsequently removed from the ELCA roster, and the congregation, a mission plant, lost all their financial backing from the synod and had to leave the church where they worshiped. The ELCA was slow to respond to the harm done to the pastor, the mission congregation, and our ELCA Latin name members. In June 2022, Bishop Rohr resigned amidst a history of accusations of racism. Presiding Bishop Eden formally apologized to the congregation, now Iglesia Luterana Santa Maria Peregrina, saying the lack of proper procedure and the intentionality of culturally insensitive actions, announcing Pastor Nelson Robel Gonzalez's termination on that day. The vigil of Our Lady of Guadalupe was a sharp assault on your dignity. It is right that we lament racial bias and harm, intentionally or not, in the ELCA. The ELCA is committed to anti-racism, yet it remains predominantly 96% white. In the northern Illinois Synod region, Latinx make up the second most common ethnicity after Caucasians, but are not widely represented in our congregations. Lamenting together opens a door to something even stronger. We can actively listen to the stories of people on the margins of church and society, learn about their challenges, gifts, and their calls. Deep listening helps us intentionally lean into disrupt oppression and make our congregations places of trust, inclusion, and equity. Martin Luther said, "It is a consolation and the superabundant goodness of God that a person may boast of such a treasure as that Mary is his real mother, Christ his brother, and God his Father. By this token you sit assuredly in the Virgin Mary's lap and are her dear child." Perhaps the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, past and present, will continue to remind us that God is still at work to make us one holy and loving family for the sake of the Son of Mary.